Hello, and welcome to the Missoula Art Museum's virtual Art in the Moment, an art program for those experiencing dementia and their caregivers. This is a recorded segment, so you are welcome to watch it again at your own convenience. My name is Grissom-Kiely, and I'm the curator of education at the Missoula Art Museum, and this is my friend and professional artist and teaching artist, Bev Glueckert.
Hi, everybody.
We are standing here in the Arresti Gallery here at the Missoula Art Museum, where the exhibition Doug Turman, Curious, is on display. This building that we're in used to be the Andrew Carnegie Library. Some of you might remember prior to the Missoula Art Museum.
We are very excited to have you here with us. I wanted to start by telling you a little bit about artist Doug Turman. Doug Turman is a visual artist who lives in Helena, Montana. Turman was born in Seattle and grew up in Missoula, where he studied art with George Gogas and Leela Audio at Hellgate High School. Did any of you attend Hellgate High School? He received his BA in Fine Arts from Oberlin College and a Master's in Fine Arts from the University of Montana. Between degrees, he worked at the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C., the first museum dedicated to modern art. With his wife, Mary Lee Larison, he owned Turman Larison Contemporary, an art gallery in downtown Helena for 16 years. His current work in painting, printmaking, and photography is strongly influenced by his many trips to Italy, where he teaches painting workshops annually. During all education and public programs, MAM reads aloud acknowledgement statement in honor of the land that we're standing on. Written in conjunction with tribal leaders, quote, MAM sits on the ancestral territories of the Salish and Pondere peoples, and we respect the indigenous stewards of this land. MAM acknowledges their rich cultures as fundamental to artistic life in Montana and to the work of MAM, unquote. During the next 30 minutes or so, we will, first of all, share a little bit with you about Doug Turman's exhibition titled Curious as a Whole. You'll be able to look at individual pieces of artwork from the exhibition. You will get to watch videos of Doug Turman talking about his art and his history with MAM. You'll get to reflect and to respond, and then you'll get to imagine. So please have some paper and a pencil ready.
What is this exhibition, Doug Turman, Curious? This survey of artwork by painter Doug Turman includes his Love Notes series, whimsical etchings, an array of paintings on paper. Turman works with obsessive precision and sometimes extreme looseness, uniting disparate images from many different influences, including Persian miniatures, Henri Matisse's cut paper, Paul Klee's modernist paintings, and Kurt Schwitter's collages. Collectively, they present an artistic vision that has been Turman's for nearly 40 years. A postmodernist at core, Turman recontextualizes his source material, and he juxtaposes text and images, and throws in a variety of painterly and cultural references to make satisfying works that are firmly rooted in play, irony, satire, and fun. Turman says, quote, "I think of each frame as a proscenium. Each painting is its own little world. At one point, I decided I wanted to be able to paint whatever I could think of," unquote. Now, we'd like to invite you to watch a video of the artist Doug Turman discussing his exhibition and what it means to him to be an artist.
So a quick introduction. This is Brandon Ranchus, the senior curator at the Missoula Art Museum, and the artist Doug Turman standing in Doug Turman's exhibition, Curious. Doug, I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the role of curiosity in your work.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a good question. The title came to me a while back, but because this show is part of the 5th grade art experience outreach, I was thinking, I was a 5th grader in Missoula, and I was a curious kid, and I was a very shy kid, and so it was a natural progression for me to be an artist. I had some ability as a kid, and so I just became kind of the class artist. And I was encouraged by my teachers and my parents. So I think curiosity has been something that has been a real motivator for me, and I was very fortunate to be in an environment growing up where that was considered a very valuable enterprise or just interest. And then now as an adult and working on these pieces and looking over this, this is a kind of a reunion of some work for me. Is like, it's like, who did this, or how did these happen? Is that I think the word can be, it reflects the starting point for all of the pieces, but I think it's also a pretty good adjective for how they turn out. It's like, why did it come out like that? And I think that's one of the really interesting allowances of art, is that it's not narrative storytelling. It's not necessarily natural colors. So it allows for things to be presented in ways that are outside of convention. And so I think that term curious kind of gives it an umbrella and gives me permission to make the work, and I hope as a viewer it gives you a lot of permission to say, to express your opinion, and to have them just say, yeah, why would he do that? That doesn't make any sense to me, but maybe it's interesting, and so those kinds of dialogues, I hope that's maybe an experience that you'll have in this room.
And there's a relationship between curiosity and play in your work, and I'm wondering, what does play even look like in your art studio?
Yeah, it's like watching a movie or something. The idea of play is very attractive. The actual work of making paintings seems like coal mining sometimes. It's so slow at times, and it's so uncertain. I do not do preparatory sketches. I really never have unless I had to in school. So I want the work to seem playful, and it's like, my work isn't about reflections of things that bother me socially, or I'm very engaged in those things in my life, but my paintings really aren't my outlet for that. I've always tried to be kind of in that Matisse camp, which is painting and fine art can be kind of a relief from certain anxieties, and particularly the age we live in now. So I very much want to communicate a sense of play and openness and permission to try new things. The reality in the studio is a bit more of a grind. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very much so. When you talk about Matisse, the piece that's next to you, the Studio C, really reminds me of something that Matisse would do. I don't know if you want to point that out or talk about that relationship.
Well, it's like, yeah, please. I just brought him up, but I'm not putting myself in his category. This piece does reflect the time that we were working here. As you and I started playing the show 2 years ago, and I was working along, and then we included the idea of including some of these oil paintings as well, but then COVID hit. And I have a really nice big studio, but I just didn't think I was essential business or something, or it didn't seem right for me to go to my studio and paint. It didn't seem in the spirit of the lockdown and the kind of community sense that we'll get through this. And so I said, okay, I can work from home.
Yeah.
So this is based on the studio. I took a table home and I just painted in what we call our sunroom at our house. And it's this beautiful room with windows on 3 sides. And it was winter time and I could just look out and just make, play along. So we have a lemon tree. It had lemons, but it was like -20 outside, and it was just like, okay, this is kind of a reflection of the space I'm in, And this is the reverse of an old vintage envelope, so it's this beautiful security pattern, and with the gouache paint, you can get this opaque layer over it. So it created a very interesting, I thought, an interesting dynamic. So that was kind of the start, but it's definitely a result of our recent history, is that is directly related to working at home.
It's gorgeous, and I love how you invite so much of the studio into your artwork. When you're painting, whatever's going on in the studio, the little palettes, you can find. You can
and we've always invited people into our studios, and when we had the gallery, we often made an effort to create studio tours. And if I go into someone's studio, it's like, I try not to be sort of insulting, but I'm almost more interested in how their studio's laid out. And it's like, what kind of pencils do you use? Oh, the work looks really good, but there's just something about seeing the workspace, and a plate of colors, it's just such a beautiful thing, and I'm sure any artist that has sort of a sense of honesty about their work is they could work for hours on something and then just look over at just this pile of materials, and there's times when just that random, non-affected, with any intention, supply pile is just as interesting or better than what you've spent, the last 4 hours working on, with your college degree and all your experience or something. It's just the materials themselves are so beautiful. And so that's really one of the nicest parts of the job, is no matter how frustrating the work can be at times, is that you can just take a tube of paint, or you can connect yourself with this long history, and you can just say, thank you, thank you to all the people that developed all this, and thank you for all the people that showed me how to do it the way I do it, which is different, but you really need mentors. And so that's a nice part of the studio experience, is just the materials themselves.
I think that's part of the reason we wanted to bring some of the attendant life of the studio into the show, right?
Yeah.
Is because of that. How much do you think about materiality and materials in your work when you're preparing?
Oh, I think about it quite a bit. I've worked in a museum like you have, and so there are archival issues. I'm just a paint freak. But I also, but I mean that in a way that is like a good cook or something. Is, I always tried to get the best materials I could get, not for the status of the materials, but because of the quality. And so, like this painting, colors. A number of these colors here are actually they are absolutely the best oil paints I can find. A lot of these paints are made by Michael Harding. He's a colorman. He lives near London, and he makes paint in the old formulas. And there are, so you can get something like ultramarine, and there's a pretty big band. But if you squeeze out some of his colors, there's Williamsburg, there's a few other manufacturers that they just source the better materials, better oils, and it has to do, particularly in oil painting, the grind of the materials.
Not a lot of additives.
Yeah, so I think one of my favorite spots in all of any of these paintings is this little bit of color. It's called sepia. And I was thinking of Turner, and this is made by Sennelier, the first company to put paint in tubes. And it's just such, there's no, it's very real, but there's really no attempt at illusion. It's just, I just squeezed it out from the tube and then brushed it out to make it look like a palette, and so
there it is.
Yeah, but the quality of that paint is so beautiful. And, like this is kind of an ultramarine, but when you look at the very large painting at the opening of the show, which is called Enter Here with the Dog up in the corner, in the upper right corner of that painting that's the very best ultramarine I think that you can get. And ultramarine really used to be like lapis lazuli. But if you go to like the Scrovegni Chapel in Padova, and you see Giotto's paintings, you see this blue, and that blue is from Michael Harding. And I just think, regardless of whatever skill I have, is that you'll just not find a more beautiful ultramarine. And it's maybe 1% better, 2% better, but because I work with these materials and I paint, carefully, it's just, those kinds of bits are just really, really interesting.
Now that we're down here, can you walk us through this particular piece and really tell us about how the images came together?
Yeah, I first painted this painting for when we opened our new space, our gallery. Mary Lee Larison and I, we're business partners before we were married. But we had a gallery downtown, and then Mary Lee very sensibly said, we have to move or get bigger or just close, because it isn't going to work in this original space. So we remodeled the spot. So I painted this canvas the first time for that opening, and it had these, you can see back here, which were these storm grates from this sidewalk in Milan. There's a picture I took, and so this sort of purple and some of these patterns here, it just repeated very equally over the whole painting, and you can see some of it still showing through. But I did that, and that was a painting I liked, and then just put it away because it's so big.
Yeah.
Then I had a show at the Holter Museum, 2015 or something like that, and I thought, I've got that big painting, and it was in a very, very big space at the museum, their largest space. So I thought, I need some bigger work. I could rework that. So I changed it from, I can't remember the original title, it might have just been Milano, to Lunch in Cannobio, which is this little lakeside town on Lake Maggiore, right next to the border with Switzerland. And we just had this amazing lunch one day. So that's where the ghosts of these bottles and glasses are, and these tulips went all the way across here, and I can't remember what else. I guess the stars, this blue, none of the white stars, but these more finely pointed ones and these other ones. So all of that was there, but not this lighter blue, not the black, not the dog, anything. So it was kind of these grates painted over, and then there was sort of a table setting down here. And then this show came up, and I was like, I could work that again, So then that's when I just started attacking it. And added a lot of this impasto and overworked. And now the painting has the energy I always hoped it might have had. And these large paintings are fun to work on because the small paintings, you've got such a small aperture, is that the contours and things you have to get them right. There's very little kind of room for error, so to speak, because you can see the whole painting at all one time. This painting, no matter, really, unless you stand so far back, you can't see the whole thing. And so, or you have to keep your eyes moving. So it's a different kind of problem with painting, but with the scale, the intensity of the oil paint, it's fun. So it's one that I'm interested in. I think it'll send me in a direction to go, but it's very new to me. So in a way, I hope I can see it like you see it, almost for the first time, especially now that it's out of my studio and in on this really nicely lit wall.
I love that this is the first piece you see as you walk in, and it says, it entreats you, enter here, which is the title of the piece.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, in closing, just a little
Yes.
bit about series and
Yeah.
what you've done. Can you talk a little bit about why you work in series?
I like the restriction, and so like the love notes, that was handmade paper.
Which is the grid you see
Yeah,
on the
the
back
grid.
wall.
And these little 4x6 pieces of paper, and it was like, okay, let's do that. And then the paper was challenging to work on, but then the more you keep working on something, you have to keep inventing, and I think a series requires, at least I think of the way I work on a series, is that there are little progressions, but you can also make really enormous leaps. You can go from, like, here's a bulldog to some plants, here's like almost completely abstract to something. Now, chronologically, that's not the order they were done, but given that they're all on the same essential piece of paper and they're all framed the same, is then you have this, like, I think that said here, like a proscenium or something. Like here's a TV screen, or here's something, a movie screen, a theater set, and how many different ways can you change it? It's the same presentation, but then you really have to be creative. Then you have to. A series for me forces me to get way out of my comfort zone. And that's the reason I stopped at 170, is because I thought, I'm going to start repeating myself. This is going to become a commodity. So even though they were financially a successful series, it was just like, nope, it's time to do something else.
That's really great. Well, thanks so much, Doug. We really appreciate this, and we hope that the viewers get to come down to the museum and see the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
I hope you'll come. Yeah, please do come. There's lots of space. It's very comfortable here. Just wear a mask. I'm standing appropriately far enough away, and it's just for audio purposes, but I can show you here. So even artists follow the rules. So please come to the Missoula Art Museum and see all of the shows and support the arts community in Missoula.
As we look at a few individual pieces of art in this exhibition, there are several ways for you to interact. If you have someone with you, you can turn to that person to reflect, to discuss, to respond, or ask a question. You can even pause your video to do this. You can write your comments down on a piece of paper. You can sketch or draw onto a piece of paper. And since this is a recorded segment, you can watch it as many times as you'd like. Have your paper or sketchbooks and a pencil ready. What do you notice or wonder about this piece titled Enter Here? What is the first thing that catches your eye? Juxtaposition, meaning things placed next to each other, of unexpected images is a core motif for Turman. Notice some surprising things that he has integrated into this painting or collage. How does it make you feel when viewing this piece? How do you imagine Turman felt when he was creating this piece? Play, exploration, love of materials, his love for nature, and the creative act are all important aspects of Turman's studio practice. We will focus for a few minutes on Doug Turman's piece called Studio C. It's a mixed media piece involving gouache and stamp on vintage envelope that he completed this past year in 2020. What do you notice about this piece? What do you wonder? This is a mixed media piece. That means that the artist used different art materials mixed together. What media or art materials would you think that he used? Can you tell what kind of paper this piece was painted on? Look at the white diagonal lines. And what do you see? An envelope. And does anyone know what the C in the middle of the painting might stand for? It stands for COVID. Doug Turman created a home studio to make art during the COVID pandemic since he couldn't go to his art studio. Does this artwork remind you of the art of any famous artists? Turman was inspired by the artwork of artist Henri Matisse. Artist Henri Matisse was a French artist. Color was an important focus for him. If you want to learn more about Matisse, we've provided this video link. Let your eyes move around this painting and notice. Are you curious about this painting? Curious about your own reaction or how the painting was constructed, or about something that you would like to make? What does this painting feel like to you? To me, it feels enlivening and vibrant. Do the colors create a feeling for you? This painting is called Options and Optimism. I think this is something that we're all feeling like we need right now. I know that we are. Close your eyes and notice what strikes you about this piece.
By his own estimation, a sketch of Doug Turman's childhood could be a Norman Rockwell painting. Are you familiar with Norman Rockwell? The famous 20th century American painter. Doug Turman's family lived in a large frame house in Missoula's University District across the street from Paxson Elementary School, where his father, George, was raised. George served as Missoula's mayor, and Turman's mother, Kay, raised 5 children and imbued them with art and literature. Turman's parents strongly encouraged his artistic development, which began at a table perched in front of a large window in his second-floor bedroom, which he shared with his brother. Through that window, Turman began his travels into the greater world. Turman's parents, with their combined civic activism, community caring, and love of art, helped conjure up the Missoula Art Museum, MAM. When the Missoula Public Library moved to its new headquarters on Main Street in 1972, the empty Carnegie Library building was eyed by artists as an ideal space for art exhibits. Leela Audio organized an exhibit of contemporary textiles, then a pioneering art form, created by Nancy Erickson, Dana Boussard, and herself, after being turned down by the curator of the Gallery of Visual Arts at the University of Montana, who swore he would never exhibit women's work. Audio, one of Doug's influential high school art teachers, continued to work hard to organize artists in support of the conversion of the building to an art museum. The groundswell to make an art museum in the old Carnegie Library gained traction, and Mayor Turman was convinced to commit the city-owned building to the purpose, initiating a partnership that thrives today. Kay Turman became a ringleader of the effort to gain local government support, along with new Mayor Juliette Gregory. Years later, Kay told me, quote, "Juliette worked the Republicans and I worked the Democrats," unquote. Kay served unofficially as interim director and selected the first exhibition for MAM called Native Funk and Flash, which opened in March of 1975. Turman's exhibition, Curious, is an emotional returning for the artist, giving the strong influence that trips the Carnegie Library had on him as a child. A physical fondness that is felt in memory and in the present. And it is a homecoming to the home for art made by his parents, who worked so hard and cared so much for Missoula. Turman and his wife, Mary Lee Larison, have demonstrated many of his parents' attributes in his Montana home city of Helena. Together they own Turman Larison Contemporary, an art gallery in downtown Helena, for 16 years. During those years, they were statewide community players and avid advocates for artists. Turman now concentrates on making his own artwork, and that is reflected in the intensity and breadth of the exhibition, which is a mere fraction of the work currently in Turman's studio in Helena. All of us at MAM are pleased to present this remarkable solo exhibition that has been a long time coming.
We thought this might interest some of you who may have lived in Missoula or in Montana when MAM was founded in 1974. Doug Turman also created a video for you to watch that is a simple art-making exercise called cross-hatching, which he uses often in his art. You can watch the video, or you can do the exercise along with Doug. All you need is a pencil and paper and something round, like an orange or an apple. This video exercise will take about 10 minutes. And now it's time for you to make art.
So my project today, it's kind of a puzzle or a riddle. Here's an orange, but you could take anything that's round, like this, so it's completely smooth. It doesn't have any flat sides, and all of the surfaces are curves. And it's, so it looks round in the world, and it sits there and it casts a shadow. But it's all curves. How can you draw something like this that's all curves and round using only straight lines? So think about that for a second. Can you do that? All curves, would you draw it using only straight lines? And then you might have an idea. Some of you may already know to do this. You may be better at it. But think about it for a sec, and then I'll show you how to do it. It's fun. You can show your friends, and it's a little bit of a trick. But once you do it, it becomes pretty obvious. So if you're doing it for the first time, it's a little tricky the first step. So what I might suggest you do is you get a pencil and you just make a circle with your pencil, very, very light. And you just make the best circle you can see. You can't really see mine very well, and that's fine, because you don't really want it to see. This is just a guide. And at the end of the drawing, you won't see it at all, or if you did, you could erase it. So what we'll do first is, you find what's comfortable for you, and we're going to be making a lot of straight lines. And so I kind of like to draw from the top down and from left to right because I'm right-handed, but you may want to go horizontally. If you're left-handed, you'd be doing it opposite of that. But I'm going to start on the edge of where I've made my very faint circle and just draw a tiny little straight line like that. You can see that there. It's just one little, you can kind of see the circle maybe. Then next to that, one that's a little bit longer, and it's touching the circle at the top and the bottom. And then I'll just go across the whole page inside that circle I've drawn from top to bottom, drawing these straight lines that I'm trying to keep them fairly evenly spaced. But now if your lines are a little more wiggly or they different widths and spacings, don't worry about it. That's not important. It'll still work. And this takes a little practice. I've been doing this for a long time, and even these lines aren't that straight. So we just go top to bottom. These are the longest lines now. Now they'll start getting shorter again as I get closer to the other edge. Okay, now they're going to get dramatically shorter. And then this will be my last little line like that. So there's the bottom of my page, and it just basically looks like a circle now. There isn't any dimension to it, but it's all straight lines, and it does have a round shape. Now, this is called cross-hatching, this technique. And so now we're going to create some lines that go across these lines. You start creating little shapes. But let's pretend, like you can see on this orange, it's brighter in this area and it's darker in other areas, and the lighting in your room will vary. So on my piece of paper, I'm going to mark here like a little sun or a lamp, that's going to be the direction where my light is coming. So the light is shining on this orange or this object here. So it's going to be a little brighter in this area, and it's going to be darker on this side. So let's make the next row of lines, however many more lines we add, it makes it darker. So we don't draw all the way across this time, but we go most of the way. So I'm doing at a slight angle, and I'll start back here, and I'll go across, and this part of the drawing will get darker. And these are still straight lines. They're spaced just like before. You can turn your paper to make it more comfortable. And right about here is where I'm going to start to lighten up a little bit. I'm going to draw the line and then wait, give it a little break so that part stays a little bit lighter. This might be a little shorter, and that stays a little lighter. This one maybe about the same, and then about like that, and then kind of come back and finish it off. Okay, so now it's starting to look like it has a little bit of volume, but this is still pretty early on, and we want it to get darker here. So we'll put more lines down here, but they'll be shorter, okay? And we'll do it at a different angle. So now I've kind of got diamonds there. Now I'll probably make some lines that go across this way. So you turn the paper to make it comfortable for you. And I'll start like this. And we'll see how we get. Okay, bring that up around here, and then maybe here we bring a few of these across again. Is that, you can see that okay? Like that. Maybe a couple more in there. They don't all have to connect. But now you see that's starting to look a little bit more round. And so I think I'm going to make this bottom part, because this is where the highlight is and our shadow will be down here. I'm going to make it even a little darker there. So I can just look at the white areas and just try and draw lines through some of those white areas so that the overall image just gets darker. There's less white and there's more black, or your pencil, whatever you're using. I'm using this marker because it's easy to see. It's much easier to do it in pencil like you've got. Okay, so let's see how that looks. Now you can see it's starting to look kind of round. Does that make sense? Now let's make the shadow. You can see here there's a shadow. It kind of comes out as sort of an oval shape. So we can, that'll be at the bottom, the dark end here. So I'm going to draw some straight lines and try and make kind of an oval shape, kind of like when we started the drawing. So it'll be a little bit shorter here, and then it gets longer and longer, longer, longer. Maybe about the same, then it starts to get a little shorter. And you don't always know quite where to start and stop, but you'll figure it out with some trial and error. Okay, so there, that looks a little bit like a shadow. And sometimes the shadow's a little darker right where at the bottom of the object, so we could go back in and fill in a couple of these gaps with lines in the same direction, because that's just easier in this case. Like that. Okay, so does that now start to look a little more like the shadow? Okay, and then we'll add one more thing that'll really make it look dimensional, like it's three-dimensional. We'll add something called a horizon line. And I'm going to start, and I'm just going to draw it right through the middle or right behind the center of this round object. So go from here and then stop at the edge and then just continue across in my mind and then pick it up at the other side. And it looks like that. And now it looks like this ball is kind of sitting on the table. So this would be your desk, and this would be the background, and your friends and the teachers and the windows and all that stuff is back there, and you could draw that in. But here you can kind of see that this appears to be sitting on a surface. It has some gravity and it has some shape. It has a 3-dimension to it. So you can see it looks a little bit like the orange here, but it's all straight lines. So is that pretty interesting? And I think you can do that, and you get the practice for it, and you can draw all kinds of things like this. It's really fun, but it's called cross-hatching.
And now, an opportunity for you to imagine. What do you want to create with your pencil and paper? That is up to you. Just relax and let your ideas flow out of the pencil. Please yourself and enjoy the process. You might think about humor or the joy of placing things together that are not usually seen together, that we call juxtaposition, and used by Doug Turman. You might think of other artists that you like for inspiration, like Doug Turman did with artists such as Henri Matisse. What artists inspire you, and why? Ask yourself, what am I interested in? What brings me joy? Where do I go in my imagination. Begin making sketches in your sketchbook until you have an idea that you like. Now to create. Get your pencil and paper ready. At your home or living space, begin anywhere. You might start by experimenting with combinations. You might draw some dogs, or mountains, or a special person or place. You might begin with cutting or tearing images from an old magazine. You might get very curious about your process. The creative process is usually filled with many detours, wrong turns, and dead ends, but don't be discouraged. Keep going, for this is how we find our way to what we want to make. Stay curious, and you will end up where you need to be. Our time has unfortunately come to an end. If you press pause on any of the images in this video, you can continue to see Doug Turman's artwork, and you can continue creating with your pencil and paper.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you'll tune in for Ma'am's upcoming Art in the Moment on the first Mondays of each month. The next one is on Monday, February 1st at 2 p.m. Please remember that the museum is open Tuesdays through Saturdays from 10 to 5. We are free. We just require a mask upon entrance. So please remember to bring your mask. And we hope to see you here in this exhibition. And then also we have exhibitions throughout the museum. I just wanted to thank our sponsors. Thank you to Montana GEC at the University of Montana for sponsoring Art in the Moment, and to the continued support of Dementia Friendly Missoula and Missoula Aging Services. Thank you. Hope to see you at MAM.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.